Good evening. I have 7 o'clock, and I'll call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Greg David,
Present.
Mr. Tyler Dean, appears as absent, and Miss Emily Hamburg,
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith,
Here.
and Mr. John Welch.
Present.
And you have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. This evening, we have Dr. Robert Lindstedt from Principal of Sunrise Christian Academy to lead us in prayer. Dr. Lindstedt.
Thought tonight I'd read Psalm 19 in celebration of the eclipse that many of us enjoyed in this area. The heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech. Night unto night shows knowledge. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandments of the Lord are pure, enlightening the eyes. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey in the honeycomb. Father God, we come to you tonight. We give you thanks for all that you are and all that you've done for us. Father, we're so glad that you're so great that you've designed the heavens, whether it's a sunny day or a cloudy night, you designed it for us to enjoy. Father, we thank you for your protection, for your blessing, for your encouragement. Father, we pray tonight, especially for our city workers, the firemen, the policemen, our city fathers, even those who work in the various jobs to make our city run so smoothly. Father, we thank you for your goodness to us. We thank you for salvation through Jesus Christ, his death, his shed blood, and his resurrection. We pray and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance to the American flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So this evening, we have one proclamation, so I'll read the proclamation. It's Arbor Day 2024. To the citizens of Bel Aire, Kansas, greetings. Whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling cost, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and beautify our community. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Therefore, I, Jim Benage, Mayor, do hereby proclaim April 20th as Arbor Day in the city of Bel Aire and urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and to promote the well-being of the future generations. And I have signed this proclamation today. Move on to the next agenda item, determine agenda additions. Are there any additions to consider? Hearing none, we'll move on to consent agenda. So it only contains the minutes from the April 2nd, 2024 City Council meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith,
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
a motion by Mr. Smith, a second by Mr. David. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Discussion and approval of appropriation ordinance. This appropriation ordinance encompasses the 3/27/2024 through April 8th, 2024 expenses and one payroll cycle. Expenditures amounted to $324,861. Of the reported expenses, $9,322 are infrastructure costs for new developments, and these costs are paid through special assessments. I'll entertain a motion to approve the appropriations ordinance.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. David,
make a motion to approve appropriations ordinance number 24-07.
Second.
motion by Mr. David, a second by Ms. Hamburg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Move on to city requested appearances. So this evening we have Aaron Maxwell from Bel Aire. He's president of Bel Aire Chamber of Commerce to give us a quarterly report. Mr. Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, City Council. I just want to give us an update for the first quarter for the Bel Aire Chamber. So far for the year, we have 29 members. So we're a little over halfway to our goal of 50. We've got $6,075 in corporate sponsorships so far for the year. Our current checking account balance is $20,985.67. We do have a full speaker and tour calendar for the year. So we've got all the months filled. Last month we had the Kansas Veterans Festival speak. Upcoming this next month in May, we have Chance Hayes he's retired from the National Weather Service speaking. And then in June, Pete Meitzner, County Commissioner, will be our speaker. All right, upcoming events. Friday, we have a ribbon cutting here in town at the Homestead Senior Residences. It's this Friday. And then the next event we have planned, we're going to do an evening event this year in the summer, which we haven't done before, try to get some participation from some companies that aren't able to break away for lunch and come to our normal lunch meetings. So we're going to plan an evening event. We were going to do it at Rail Hoppers, but since they're moving, kitchen's moving in, we're replanning. So we'll let everybody know about that sometime when we get that figured out. Then we have the Fall Festival coming up October 19th. And then we have the Winter Festival in December. I think that concludes my report. We appreciate your support. Does anybody have any questions for me this evening?
Questions for Mr. Maxwell? I guess
All
not.
right.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Mayor.
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'm glad we're on our way to getting good membership. Yeah, that's great. Okay. Move on to citizen concerns. I have no request for citizens to speak. Are there any citizens that would like to speak to council this evening? Hearing none, we'll move on to public hearing. So the purpose of public hearing is to hear from taxpayers, Bel Aire residents, and other stakeholders in regard to issuance of city of taxable industrial revenue bonds for the Aspen Funds LLC in a principal amount not to exceed $105 million. And in regard to exemption for ad valorem taxation of property acquired, constructed, and purchased with the proceeds of such bonds. The bonds are proposed to be issued by city under authority of KSA's 12-1740 at Sequel, and it is amended to pay the cost of acquiring land and constructing, equipping approximately 5 buildings of approximately 912,000 square feet total for use in industrial, manufacturing, warehouse, distribution, flex, and other office purposes to be located immediately northeast of the intersection of 53rd Street North and Webb Road in the city. The city further intends to lease such facilities to Aspen Funds LLC, a Kansas limited liability company or related entity or tenant. So at our April 2nd meeting, the council approved a letter of intent for issuing taxable industrial revenue bonds to Aspen Funds LLC. Following this, on April 4th, the notice of public hearing was published in the city official newspaper and mailed to local taxing entities, including Circle School District and the Sedgwick County Clerk, as required by state statute. The council is now set to conduct its public hearing. The purpose is to gather further feedback from taxpayers, citizens, and other stakeholders on the proposed bond issuance. Later in the meeting, the council will consider a resolution of intent to proceed with issuing the bonds. So I hereby open the public hearing. Anybody who would like to speak to the council concerning these IRBs?
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Hamburg,
I'm going to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Hamburg, a second by Mr. Welch. If no one spoke, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. We'll move on to council member reports. We'll start with Mr. David.
Mr. Mayor, I have no report, but I will mention that Betty Martine's funeral on the 25th, if you can't make it in the morning at 10 a.m., I believe it is live stream. You just go to resurrectionwichita.com. You can watch it from the live stream.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Smith,
I have no report. Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
Minor report. It's a big deal to the company, but I went to Walton's groundbreaking ceremony. Gosh, what day was it?
Yesterday.
It was yesterday. Boy, I can't remember squat. Anyway, I think they will be a great business to be welcome to Bel Aire, and wish them lots of success.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Hamburg.
Thank you, Mayor. Soccer season concluded on April 6th, and I just want to thank all the rec staff and volunteer coaches and all the families that participated. My kids always enjoy that. On Thursday, April 11th, I attended the Chamber's Issues Forum that coincided with the REAP meeting, and Wichita Mayor Lily Wu spoke about a variety of things. They're trying to fill police officer positions. They have a number close to 100 open that they're trying to get those filled in. But two other things I would highlight is the en banc meeting between Sedgwick County and Wichita recently happened, and there's discussion about where can efficiencies be found. The moderator was Susan Peters, and she said, well, people have been talking about this for 2 decades, so basically we'll believe it when we see it. And people have a variety of opinions on that issue. And then the other big thing I will highlight from that is the multi-agency center to sort of address the homeless issue and people that need various resources. The $80 million has been thrown around in the news a lot. She definitely sort of distanced herself from that and said it would be some sort of stripped down center, perhaps with just the city kind of being a conduit to not get into the nonprofits lane, so they could just kind of direct people to resources they needed. Those were the two of the bigger issues that were talked about there. I also attended the Walton's groundbreaking yesterday, and agree it's a great family, and looking forward to that going up at Sunflower Commerce Park over the next year. And then just wanted to remind residents that week from Saturday on the 27th is the shredding and e-recycling day from 9 to noon here at City Hall. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you for attending the REAP meeting with Mayor Wu in my absence, because I found out about that after I already made another commitment, the day after I made another commitment, so I couldn't do both. So but I appreciate your doing that. So I'll move on to the mayor's report. So many will remember former city councilwoman Betty Martine. She passed away on Sunday, April 7th, after a battle with cancer. So as Councilmember Gregg mentioned, there will be a vigil service at Church of the Resurrection at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, April the 24th, and her funeral will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, April 25th. And I think your announcement was that the funeral will be live streamed. So, okay. So if you can't make it there, you can see it on the live stream. So I do want to give a shout out to Bel Aire Lions Club for paying for the restriping of the rec center parking lot. Bel Aire Lions are great supporters of Bel Aire, and we greatly appreciate the many things they do for the betterment of Bel Aire. On Thursday, April 9th, I attended the WAMPO TPB meeting, TPB meeting. Let's get the initials right. And we heard about updated status of regional transit implementation plan, or more commonly known as the bus service. Another round of public meetings is being planned for late in May. Hopefully we'll have firm dates in the next week or so. The last round was rather short notice, and the businesses had little time to make plans to attend. So I really hope we can get great attendance from the northern part of Sedgwick County to that meeting, not just Bel Aire, but Park City, Keachai, Valley Center, all stakeholders, because that's an important opportunity for us to expand the bus service regionally. WAMPO also received their audit report for 2023. There are no findings for 2023, and this is at least the second year in a row where WAMPO has had no findings in their financial audit. And that's great news to see the financial matters of WAMPO are on the right track and remain stable. On Saturday, April 13th, I had the honor to meet General Michael Flynn at Sunrise Christian Academy. You may remember General Flynn was appointed twice by President Obama for top DoD security intelligence roles, and then appointed by President Trump as his first national security advisor. Then yesterday, April 15th, as Councilmember Welch and Councilwoman Hamburg said, I also attended the Waltons groundbreaking for their new facility on 53rd Street, and I look forward to their opening in spring of 2025. Earlier in this meeting, I signed a proclamation on Arbor Day 2024 as April 20th. That's this Saturday. Bel Aire has again been recognized as Tree City USA by the Arbor Day Foundation. So a big thank you to the Tree Board for helping us retain this recognition. This Saturday, April 20th, the Tree Board is celebrating trees and Arbor Day from 9 a.m. to noon in the community room here at City Hall. So I encourage everyone to attend that. So I now ask our city attorney for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to give a brief report, an update on the sewer use ordinance. I talked about this the last couple of meetings, but this is a large ordinance and it has enforcement provisions. It has a lot of tools that our staff has not worked with before. Bel Aire staff, our city engineer, our public works, our manager has organized staff trainings, multiple with the assistance of Burns McDonald so that we can become more familiar with it. More recently, some of our city crews and the city contractor responded to a sanitary sewer stoppage. It was basically the result of fog. For those who are not familiar with that, that's excess fats, oils, and grease that blocked the flow of sewage. This is unfortunate that occurred, but it's also an opportunity to look at our sewer use ordinance, figure out a process. Everyone came together. There was discussing the issue, discussing a potential source, how to move forward. A letter has been put together that will be sent out. This letter is very educational. It talks about we've recently adopted a sewer use ordinance in December of 2023 that any discharge that results in a stoppage may be subject to enforcement actions. What I really like about this letter is that it also talks about the do's and don'ts, education of best practices, some next steps for any of our customers, such as maybe schedule this at specifically schedule a pump out of your grease interceptor at least once a month to do this. Consider training with your staff. Contact us and we can recommend companies that can help you collect specific measurements. All of this is trying to help others learn on how to be better customers. At the very end of our letter, we talk about how we believe if you follow at least these few steps that it will prevent stoppages from occurring. But more importantly, with the recent adoption of our code, we want to help others be proactive to implement preventative measures to stop any sewer blockages. And if they have any questions, they can contact us because not only is it good for the sewer system, but it's also good for them, their property, to avoid any type of sewage backing up into buildings or surrounding environment. Overall, I think this is a good update for the council, also for our staff. We're trying to figure it out as we move along, but I just wanted to say that staff's working very hard on this and we're moving forward very well. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate the effort of getting everyone educated on what proper use of sewage is, because that's been a big issue. And as we measure our sewage effluent, it's we're finding there are some concerns. So it's good that we're looking on that. Thank you. And I'll move on to city manager's report. And I see he went to the podium, so it must be a big report.
Yeah, not too big. I just want to try to bring some interaction graphs to some of my reports so it's easier to present up here. I don't think we stop and realize how much we're growing. Every once in a while, it's good to get a reminder. We have 16 active developments going on in our city right now. Of those 16, we have about 19 open phases. That equals about 1,500 plotted lots that we're going to be developing in the next 5 years. Estimated if you put 4 residents in each one of those units or so, about another 6,200 residents in the next 5 to 10 years. Our population could be 14,000. So how do I draw that in? We ended the first quarter, and I really look at new building permits, obviously. Why? How do you measure growth? In 2022, we kind of had a record year of almost 200 building permits issued. Last year, we did 142. And in the first quarter of 2024, we did 36. So if that trend continues, we'll be about 144 this year, new building permits. So I'll continue to monitor each quarter, and report those issues. I know code enforcement's been a little bit talked about, and I wanted to put some numbers in front of you. Our code enforcement officer position is open right now. So Keith and Ethan are now kind of trying to juggle both of them, but we handle about, the normal year is about 100 different complaints. The last few years, it's been about 157, 137, and we've done about 22 year to date, but we've been without a code enforcement officer for several weeks now. So that has a little bit skewed. So we're looking at probably 100 different code enforcement complaints a year. The other thing I want to touch on real quick is we did add a notices and publications button to our website. So any residents that wishes to see what notices the city brings out, they simply go to our website. Then that brings them to this page, and they can research any notice we've ever sent out. The most recent ones are at the bottom there, and then it'll bring up the notice. So it's kind of a cool tool. And then to round out, we have a lot of events coming up. Celebration of Trees is this Saturday, April 20th. Document E-Shred Day. You guys talked about that. Citywide garage sales, May 2nd through the 4th. That's no permit required for residents. And then spring cleanups, May 9th, 18th. But we'll have a council meeting, so I'll highlight those some more. But that's in my report, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to number 13A, ordinance resolutions and final actions. So we've opened and closed the public hearing on the, can't remember the name here, Aspen LLC. And so it's time to consider the IRB. If the resolution is approved, the bonds will be used to finance costs of acquiring land and constructing equipment, approximately 5 buildings totaling about 912,000 square feet for industrial manufacturing, warehouse, distribution, flex, and office purposes. Even though the city expects these facilities to be constructed over time with a separate bond each issue for each separate building, the intent resolution for the entire project is necessary now so that development can rely upon the resolution to begin planning the entire project. The city plans to lease these facilities to Aspen Funds LLC or a related entity referred to as the tenant, and the facility will be located just northeast of the intersection of 53rd Street North and Webb Road. So Mr. Kevin Cowan is here to help explain how this works. Mr. Cowan.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. I was here 2 weeks ago and told you I would be back in 2 weeks to talk about a similar process to what we discussed 2 weeks ago, and that is you had a public hearing, and now the city is in a position to issue and approve a resolution of intent on the Aspen Funds project. As the mayor indicated, this is something of a progressive project where it's expected to last several years, very large. I do think there's an expectation that the first phase of this will begin soon, and the letter of intent has a requirement that certain minimum investments be made within a certain period of time, or the letter of intent would terminate. So this resolution of intent will be in place for 10 years if you approve it. As was mentioned, it's contemplated there will be multiple bond issues, one for each building or separate phase of the project. That issue will then start the property tax abatement period and incentives for that building. So again, it's going to be progressive. We'll have sort of stacked property tax abatements and incentives on the various buildings, which again, we're anticipating 5 buildings, large buildings over a period of time. So Nothing unusual compared to what you've considered before, except this is a longer resolution of intent because we're looking toward the long-term nature of multiple phases and buildings being added to this space.
So that's slightly different than what we've seen before, right?
Yeah, typically it's probably, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Walton's project that was referenced earlier, the intent resolution for that standalone single project. Resolution of intent is in place. Project is starting quickly. Bonds will be issued relatively quickly this year. And yes, this will be a little different than that. We may have, one building starting this year with bonds, but not all five. The remaining buildings will come in future years.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cowan?
Is it going to make it tougher to finance since you're doing individual bonds for each building? It makes the bonds smaller, right?
It does. And I know they're on Zoom, the developer and representative. I'm assuming the answer is it's easier because you're taking it a piece at a time and you have a successful first building and you move on to another one as opposed to a larger plan, larger financing for 5 buildings. And that's me as your bond counsel saying that, not the developer. But the 5 buildings, that's a larger, probably more speculative project than doing one at a time, having success, moving to the next one, having success. And even your question from a finance perspective, if you have a successful $15 million financing and building, the next $20 million building's probably going to be easier than if you had $105 million all at once with 5 buildings to build and 5 buildings to fill at the outset. I hope that answers your question. I think I know what you're saying, and I do think that's probably part of the plan. It's easier to progress this way and build and have smaller financings as opposed to one large financing all at once and the risk that goes with that.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
is this the scenario where the developer typically buys their own bonds?
Don't know
Is that what
yet,
we
but
typically see here?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. And what happens if there's a default on the bonds or if the businesses go bankrupt here?
I don't know if you're asking that knowing the answer, but it's a good question. And that is the city by statute cannot pledge public funds, can only pledge revenue generated by the facility and the facility itself to the payment of bonds. So if there is a default, it's not a hit on the city's creditworthiness. That's not going to be reflected in your own general obligation bonds or something like that, because again, by statute, you can't pledge it. By statute, you have to print on the bonds that you can't pledge other public dollars, only revenues from the facility. So that would not be, as I say, a hit on the creditworthiness of the city.
Any other questions, Mr. Cowan? Are the developers on Zoom? Are they? Can
Yeah,
they speak
it's
to
a little
us?
difficult to patch them in, but yeah, Dan and Mark really wanted to be here, but I thought I wouldn't want to make them drive all that way, so I offered the Zoom option for them. So they're available if you'd like to ask a question, you can.
Okay. Well, I didn't, but I wanted to. If anybody had a question they wanted to ask of the developers, there's an opportunity, right?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
I'll make a motion to approve a resolution of the governing body of the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, determining the advisability of issuing taxable industrial revenue bonds to finance acquiring land and equipping and constructing buildings for use in industrial manufacturing, warehouse distribution, flex, and or office purposes to be located immediately northeast of the intersection of 53rd Street North and Webb Road in the city, and authorize the execution of related documents.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Smith, a second by Mr. Welch. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. We're on to item B. This is regard to paving improvements for Cozy Drive. So in 2023, the city received necessary number of petitions to make paving and drainage improvements on Cozy Drive. After engineering was completed, the project went out for bids. The city received bids from 3 contractors. The cost of the improvements for these projects will be financed through a spread as special assessments against benefiting lots. Ken Lee from Garver and Ann Stevens are here to answer any questions. I believe, my personal view is I believe we should accept the base bid plus alt one. We made a commitment to these property owners that we would take care of the drainage issues in this area if they approved the paving of the road. And that wasn't an official commitment, but it was a verbal discussion. So anyway, and Ms. Stevens.
So tonight, as the mayor said, we have the bids for Cozy Drive on the agenda. We did have 3 bidders with 2 going over the estimate and Pearson coming in under. The initial petition estimate is shown in your packet. It is kind of small to read, but the initial estimate was $320,615. There was an allowance for contingencies in that original petition estimate. The petitions are developed so far in advance. They're using kind of generalities, base numbers. So we put that number, that percentage for contingencies in to allow for some of the more specific items that will come later. The petition plus the contingencies was $352,676.50. So that does cover Pearson's bid of $341,344, their base bid. The petitions never included money for the drainage, so that was something that the city had always intended to pick up because it is something that the city is really responsible for anyway. The drainage is shown on the map in blue. It is it's technically a city street right of way, although there's no city street that will probably ever go there. It is kind of nice to have that cleaned up. We have been going around cleaning up some of our other drainage ditches that have been getting kind of pulled over by trees and brush and everything. So that is where we're at. The alternate 2 that was bid out, that would be, as is our practice, we usually bid out asphalt as well as concrete. The alternate 2 is just the concrete, turning the asphalt into the concrete. So you'd have a concrete street. That's what you have before you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Ken Lee with Garver is also here to answer questions that I cannot.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
just for clarity, when the petitions went out, we provided citizens with an estimate of what we expected their annual special assessment to be. And I think what that even broke down to per month was part of the discussion. Can you help us understand what was that original amount that was communicated and which options kind of fit within that commitment?
Okay. Yeah, I'll cover this part of it. The original estimate that was put together had the cost per month at $173 per month. One thing to note is I had used 2.5% interest back then when we started this. Interest rates have jumped a little bit. They're more like 3.5% to 4% now. So when we did the recalculation, I used 4% when I was looking at these. So we had promised 173 with the bids that we had. If you just took the base bid at the 4%, it's actually $6 a month less than we had originally proposed if you did just the base bid. And if you were to look at adding in the odd alternates, if you want to hold the citizens' cost to the 173 that thousand or 173 per month that was originally promised, and I say roughly 173. These are always estimates until you get it actually bonded out. These typically are bonded in 3 years. We don't know what the interest rate will be in 3 years. We're hoping for lower. They're promising lower, but we've all heard that before. So this was included in the packets, right? A version.
There was a lot that was included in the packet. It was a little difficult to follow, honestly.
So page 30, you said 36? Page 36 of your packet includes on the bottom right kind of a breakdown of if you wanted to accept the alternates of any kind and still hold their cost. If you did just alternate 1, the city share, we had originally estimated 105,000. It would need to jump to 110,000 to regrade that ditch. And that's only a $5,000 increase. In my opinion, that's a no-brainer to do that. It's outside the project limits, but it improves the downstream drainage. Right now, there's kind of a spot where water sits. This will take care of that. It'll also clear out the trees. It'll let the water flow more freely through the area. So it'll be beneficial for the residents in the area. So that's alternate one. If you're to do just alternate two, which was the concrete paving, it would be 122,000, or the city would have to commit $122,000, an extra $17,000 of city funds to do it as concrete paving. And then if you did both alternate one and alternate two, it would require $139,000 of city funds, so $34,000 extra. I agree with Mayor Benage that it definitely makes sense to do all the base bid plus alternate one and get the drainage taken care of. The concrete pavement part, you know, it's not a significant cost, but it's one of those things as far as just the money wise, that would be up to your discretion on whether or not you'd want to do that. And I'll let you add anything else if you want.
Do we need to decide tonight how the money's split between what the city's paying and what the residents are paying, or do we do that at the time of the bonding? Financing.
I would assume it'd be at the time of bonding, but
That's correct. But I think part of what you're doing tonight is deciding how to handle this in the future. If you accept bids, things are going to happen. We'll have temporary note maturities in 2 or 3 years, and we'll come back to this. And normally we just look at the original resolution and petitions and follow that. That's the method of assessment. That was the estimated cost, although we use the actual cost. And so what I think really is being discussed, if it's going to be something different than what was in the original resolution, you probably do need to decide that tonight, because that will be the plan in 3 years. You're going to turn contractors loose, and we won't revisit this probably, at least from my perspective, and assessments for another 2.5, 3 years. And so that's how I view it. If you're going to do something that's different than the original
So what
resolution.
did we originally specify? Can you
Yeah.
just give that in 2 sentences? I think we said we were going to pay for the ditches, but we just threw a number out. I don't know if we included enough for the ditches or not, or how we.
so in the letter is $105,000, and Ken might be able to break that down how we calculated 105,000.
But was that actually part of the resolution?
Yeah, that was part of the original agreement, and the way the petition was structured was that way. I believe it.
So then it has no relevance to the bids that we got for concrete or the ditch. It's
No,
just
it
we were
doesn't.
gonna pay
Those were things that during discussions, during design, it's like, well, let's add these in and see what happens to see if it's something that the prices are reasonable enough to go ahead and do. Frankly, the bid for the add alternate one, clearing the ditch, was a very good bid. That was much better than I expected, because when you start talking about going through trees and taking out trees, you can spend money really, really fast. And that was a very good bid on that part. So, and we've actually met with the property owner out there. He owns Treetop Nursery, and he's like, yeah, take any of these trees out you need to. I want to get the water past me. So
So
They
basically,
want the trees?
well, he'll plant, trust me, he'll plant other trees. He has access to trees. So.
Yes.
But
I
he'll keep them out of the drainage way, which is the primary issue right now, is that the drainage way is kind of plugged up with volunteer trees.
So basically, no matter which bid we take, we're going to pay 105,000 towards it.
Yes, that's correct.
Get that in one.
The question is does the city want to take on any additional expense?
So I kind of agree with Mr. Cowan's statement that probably we need to make a statement, some sort of a motion or statement tonight, saying it's our intent that this amount is to be bonded and spread as special assessment, and this other amount is to be the responsibility of the city. But whether it's all in the same bond or not, that's where we need to manage that. We're going to have an election. We're going to have an election next year, and hopefully all the same council members will be here after that election. But I don't have the crystal ball, and we need to just make sure that we memorialize that so that it's in the record that that's what our commitment here is. So
As
come that time, we can refer back to that record and say we committed to doing that.
As part of our 105, were we talking asphalt or concrete or unspecified?
Asphalt for the 105, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to suggest, and other people can argue against this, I'm not making a motion, that we take the base, the Alt 1 and the Alt 2, and we pay the 105 plus the 28 to get the concrete in there. Unless there's a good reason not to do concrete.
To do all four of them would actually be $34,000 more. Or to do both 1 and 2 along with the base bid would be $34,000.
Excuse me, yes, we should pay for the ditch also.
Okay.
I think it's more than that.
But
I think it's
that's-
40 some thousand. 16 plus 28.
I was looking
Right.
at 139
44.
minus 105 is what I was looking at for the difference there.
He's looking at
It's
big numbers instead
$45,000.
of the individual
Oh.
numbers.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
My thought here is the ditches need to be done, and that was part of the original commitment. And so that's, in my mind, part of the project. We need to do that. If we don't ever intend to put a roadway there, the question in my mind is, should we vacate the right of way? That's a different discussion, probably. But I think we should do that. And an 8% difference on the concrete and asphalt. I know it's more now, but the city's going to spend that 8% in maintenance one way or another. And if we do the concrete, then that's one less thing staff's worrying about for the next 30 years, while that concrete can mostly be left alone. So I'm kind of thinking it might be worth it to do that. But I also have questions just on the finance side of where do these funds come out of the budget and what are the implications of that?
I think if we were just talking about this one, it's not that big a deal. It's when we get to the next one that we have to.
We better understand it now, so we're
Yeah, so
gotta
two-
talk about it later.
Two things. The first, if you would like to choose, and John brought it, or Councilmember Welch brought it up, I think the language of what we're going to do, it needs to be very important. If you want to add $40-some thousand more to the city's share, make it be for drainage, not for, you can do the add concrete, but I know we're dealing with a group of citizens right now in their petition, but developers also could come paying for extra from asphalt to concrete and using that as a slippery slope. So if we want to take the concrete bid, we should increase the contribution for ditch maintenance by that amount, and the concrete road will be paid for through the specials. Just a small clarification I'd like. So there's two ways we can approach debt service for stormwater management. One, we have a stormwater fee that is brings in about $75,000 to not $80,000 a year. That could be used as a transfer to take care of this ditch work, and that's where I would propose this type of funding. We're talking 2 years out before any debt service would be there, but other than that, it'd be through the general fund. I can run a quick calculation, but it's really minimal as far as we're talking a few $100,000. It's not a few $1 million as far as debt service goes. So it would be probably a combination between the stormwater fund and the general fund.
Because we would actually finance this. We wouldn't just pay the city's portion.
That'll be a decision for the city at the time of bonding. However, so we can make that decision to do a cash contribution when we close the TIP note.
Well, one other little wrinkle I'll add into this just to create more confusion on this. Bear in mind that everything here is based on estimates. It's based on a percentage interest rate estimate. It's assuming that we don't have any change orders or anything. There's unknowns on it. The one thing to consider is if the interest rate does drop significantly, the one thing you might want to consider on your commitment on what you're going to do is, rather than it be a specific number that's paid for, just a commitment to keep it at the $173 or $174 a month. That way, if interest rates do drop, the city share might be reduced, if the interest rates end up being lower on it. Now, the downside is if interest rates go up,
That's what I'm
that's
really
the,
worried
that's the
about.
danger. So
I
there's
don't
no
wanna take
guarantees in
that
life.
risk.
But it is one of those things. That's one way to consider it too. Is are you committing to a dollar amount per lot on it, or are you committing to the special assessment cost that we'd originally done? Because our estimate per lot before was 32,700. In order to match the interest rate, we had to drop it to 27,600. So right now, if the interest rate stays high, their cost per lot would actually be lower, if that makes any kind of sense in the overall aggregate cost.
I'm going to suggest we try to keep it simple and just say, and maybe it's a second action we add in, to just say that we intend that all the paving is to be assessed as specials and all the ditch work is to be the responsibility of the city. And that way we don't get into those discussions about what happens with the interest rates and future projections and things. Nobody here really knows.
Yeah, and that's the problem with it is that when you're dealing with numbers 3 years down the road that none of us have any control over. So
just keep it simple and say that's the intent of this whole action, and then we go forward from there.
So let's say we accept a bid tonight. We decide about how much we want and we get a motion for the next meeting where we say how we're going to split that.
We could do it tonight, I think. I think we can do a motion for the bid and then another motion for how we intend it, just to be split.
Okay, the 105,000 in the mix is kind of what's screwing with my brain right now.
Mine too. I don't know how that comes into the mix.
So when we came up, so she actually, for clarification on that, what we'd done is we had committed between Aurora Park when we were talking about just ditch improvements before on both projects, Aurora Park and Cozy Drive. The city had committed, I'm going to say it was something like 500 and some thousand or $495,000 total.
Right.
So what we did is we had prorated the length of the roads based on that, and it ended up being this project was like 20% of it. The other project was 80%. So it was nothing more sophisticated than that as far as how the $105,000 amount was
I'm
made.
not worried about where it came from. I'm just trying to figure out how we allocate it in a motion to.
Yeah, I think we make it even simpler than that. Don't allocate it at all. Just say the alt one ditch number, whatever it is, and it's 16,000 in this one scenario. And that's what we're going to commit to paying.
And back to your concern, Ted, about adding concrete in here. I think this is a unique situation because these were existing roads. This is not a new development. That would be our argument against anybody else coming in and saying, well, you paid for concrete on Aurora Park, Cozy Drive. We'd say, yeah, and they were 50-year-old roads. And
I just think it's important you said that and had that conversation on the bench because
and where you're coming from. But
That's actually an excellent differentiator.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
one more question.
David.
I'm sure, thank you. I'm sure at one time we had discussed, maybe we thought we were going to get all of the dirt roads paved. But I thought we had talked about a lower cost by doing them all together in one estimate. Did we not? Or is that not possible?
That was part of the discussion, but we ended up, because they were so different in nature, we did break them up. And if the prices had held together, just the way the prices between Pearson and Kansas Paving on this, it would have actually been more awkward to have them together in this instance, just because of the way that, just looking at the bids, even if the unit costs were slightly lower, I think we would have still exceeded it. There would not be that significant of savings. And you would have had a thing where your combined bids might have been still higher because just the way they broke out, because Kansas Paving was low on one, Pearson was low on the other. So I know that's kind of muddy in the water there, but that wouldn't
have saved the city any money.
I don't see that it would have saved the city any money. And when you add the two prices up, I think it would actually, the aggregate cost would have ended up being higher as it turned out, just by happenstance.
Yeah, I think that we would not be wise to try to take on any of the paving as part of the responsibility of the city. I think we've only committed to the ditch work, and I think we need to stay with that commitment. And if we're going to, whichever paving option we do, it will be assessed to the property owners. I think we need to take that tack towards these.
Well, and to that point, the thing I will say is the one thing that we did not include in our estimates is what they call crawl in the petitions, because there's an escalator, a 1% estimate escalator. So there is adequate money to cover the concrete option within the petition if you wanted to use that crawl. So you're allowed to do that. The money is available to do that if you're so inclined.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
I'm trying to think about, kind of myself, if I were one of those homeowners and I'd signed this petition, and in that petition, it basically said, I'm willing to spend up to this amount of money, which equates to this many dollars per month. I would feel really not great if the city came along and did extra things that then put me over what I thought I'd agreed to. As a homeowner, I think I'd feel like I kind of said, yep, I'll buy that thing and I'll pay this amount for it. And I realize that the petitions have lots of legalese that include escalators and lots of language that means that it's just an estimate. But if I were those homeowners, I'd feel maybe not great about, if it went way over that. And so if we were to take that approach of base plus alt 1 and alt 2, and the paving part was completely paid for by the homeowners, what would our projection be for the total amount and the cost per month at the current 4% interest rates? Best knowledge we have today is what today is.
Yeah, and I don't have that specific calculation done already, and I don't have the right kind of calculator to do that on the fly. But just estimating it would probably lead to something in the $5 to $7 a month increase if they were to bear all the costs. It would be no more than that for them to take on that extra cost if the city held at the 105. And again, it's where it gets complicated is we have no idea what the interest rates are going to be, because based on the actual petition, when you look at the petition amount minus the 105,000 divided by their number of lots, there is enough money to cover this right now if the interest rates stay lower. And that's the issue is, like I said, when I was looking at it, as far as trying to be fair to the citizens on it and make sure that if we had told them 173, where they would be at and where the city would be at. That was the discussion we had when we were making these calculations, is we had said this is how much per month it was likely to cost. But in terms of the interest rates and all that, the extra $5,000 per lot that we've taken off to account for the interest rate with 11 shares, that's $55,000. That's enough to cover all the ad alternates. So in the most specific sense, as far as what the petition was set up for, it covers it. It's just when you factor in the interest rate change is what muddies it a little bit.
Okay, I'm going to go back to my suggestion that we take the base alternate 1 and alternate 2, and that the city agrees to pay for alternate 1 plus the 105,000 we originally said.
Okay.
I don't understand why the 105.
Because that was how we
That's
prorated
actually
out
what
the
was in the
ditch
original
work 2
petition.
years ago when we were going to do everything.
The petition actually specifically says the city's obligated to pay 105,000 of the project cost. That was in the original petition.
Did it specify what that $105,000 was to pay?
It was just your share of the improvements. It didn't. I don't know that it specifically went into that. Let me see.
Well,
105,000 went for the ditch
It does say
because
drainage improvements.
because of the drainage improvements.
But I don't think it included the blue ditch, did it? It included
is
the
correct.
ditches on the sides of the road.
That is correct.
And
The
that's
ditches
why I
on the
want to
side.
add in the alternate 1 and the city
Correct.
paying for it.
So
Well, alternate 1, does it not include the ditches along the road plus the blue?
Alternate 1 is just the blue on the screen.
Okay.
That was something that during the design, we said, this would be a perfect opportunity to get this ditch cleaned
So-
up, and then we added it
The
in
regular
as a
ditches are in the
separate-
base bid.
So
is
it was, okay, see, I was understanding that part of
Yeah.
it. So that's
Yes.
very different.
So
Alright.
just for clarity, as far as Mr. Welch says, the 105,000, the actual cost of alt one is $16,640. So are what you saying it would be the 105 plus the 16, so that'd be 121 and change then?
Okay, I'm okay with doing that, if that's what the case is. I didn't understand that before. I thought that our bids just came in way lower than what we had projected, Phil.
They
Hey,
did come
that's
in
great.
a little. They did come in a little bit lower than we projected on Cozy.
Not that much lower.
The
But not
best
that
bids
much lower.
came in lower, the others came in higher.
Yeah.
Right. On this project.
Yeah. So
I'm not
Okay.
even looking at the other
we'll,
page.
we'll cover the other project when we get
With-
to that.
Let's just stay with one project at a time.
Yeah.
Because the other
So-
one has its own complications, so.
Mr. Mayor, that one of the things that I'm wondering about is the next item is very similar to this, and it's more complicated, and there might be some value in trying to take a consistent approach across the two scenarios. So
Mhm.
I'm wondering if we should consider both before we make any decisions
I'm okay with that.
on them.
Well, we can certainly move on to a discussion and come back and call for a vote on this item and then vote on the second item if we want to do that. I think that's fine. Are we?
Mr. Mayor, to answer Councilmember Smith's question, I have a kind of a nifty. I've been dealing with special assessments for 8 years. So if you take 45,000 over 20 years at 4%, divided by 9 lots, it's about $2.81 extra. So if you're considering that, it's about $3. Ken's mental math's pretty good too, but it's almost $3 extra a month for the concrete, just for your guys' consideration.
I can't imagine
Mr.
not
Mayor.
doing that for that.
Mr. Mayor, one more question. Just to clarify, I'm still unsure why we couldn't just do Mr. Lee's idea and set the homeowner's price, and then the extra benefit we get from concrete, we could eat, but is that not, we can't divide it up that way? We can't just set theirs at a set amount and the city takes the difference because of the
We-
bonding, or?
We could set theirs at a set amount, but we run interest rate risk that if
I
interest
understand
rates
that.
go up,
I mean,
then
can
the
we-
city's eating the overreach.
Can we technically do it though, is my question? Or is there some bond thing that doesn't allow it?
Yeah, I think you can do that. And again, the mayor mentioned it earlier. This is going to be sort of the guideline for future governing bodies. This was a little different. We considered some special circumstances, and this is what we decided to do, why we decided to do it, so that in 2 or 3 years, when we're going through the assessment proceedings, and there are some variables, as we've discussed. The 173 is going to be dependent on interest rate, and so nobody can tell you this is how it will shake out exactly then, because that's a pretty big component of it. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the sort of guidance you could set forth tonight if that's how you wanted to approach it.
So with Mr. Smith's suggestion that we not vote on this action item until we talk about the other item, item C, is there any more discussion on item B before we move on to a discussion of item C? And I hear none, so I'm going to assume there isn't. So let's go on and start talking to them about item C, and then we will come back to call for a vote on item B after that discussion. So this item, and let me get my screen switched over. Maybe I will. Okay. This is in 2023, the city received the necessary number of petitions to make paving and drainage improvements on 40th and Parkwood at Aurora Park. After engineering was completed, the project went out for bids. The city received bids from 3 contractors, and the cost of improvements to these projects will be financed through a bond and special assessed against the benefiting lots. And in this case, I believe we should accept the base bid plus alternate 2. We could include alternate 1 if we'd like, but alternate 1 is removing concrete from the intersection. We made a commitment to these property owners that we would take care of the drainage issue in this area, and alternate 2 does that, but it is the entire neighborhood that alternate two covers. Is that correct, Mr. Lee?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So, and I do have one question for Ann or Ted. I think Ann probably has the answer to this, to explain what we are doing about the gravel roads in the rest of Aurora Park since we have alternate two proposal to address the drainage issues. I know that citizens are going to ask, what are we doing about the gravel roads? So please enlighten us with the plan there. Thank you.
Sure. So at this time, there is no plan to change anything with the rest of the gravel roads. We did have that gravel roads task force that did find some alternate gravel that we have been using. When they came in to give their final report, it was a decision of the council to keep that in place for about a year, which would be coming up in October. And if that continues to hold up as well as we feel it does, then to go and put that gravel on the remaining roads in Aurora Park, as probably as well as Hillcrest. And since we're paving Cozy, we don't need to do that. But there is no plans to change any of the gravel roads at this time. We did circulate a petition, as everyone knows. That petition failed in the majority of Aurora Park, with the exception of the two streets that we're doing here.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew what the plan was there, because somebody's going to ask.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Handel.
Ken, talking with you, if this is approved, you thought by end of summer this project should be completed. Does that still stand?
Yeah, there's these projects are both pretty small where they'll go fairly quickly. I will say that the one thing about going with a concrete alternative is it will add time, because they may have to stage it. They may have to have cure periods where they do part of the road and then let the other part cure it so they can keep residents going through. It's a more complicated process for construction if you do it as concrete. So it'll take a few more weeks to do it as that. But in either case, if these were approved now, they should both be done before the end of summer.
So is this base bid similar to item B, where the base bid includes ditch work and then you have an additional alt 2 for something else? Or how's that working here?
So this project was a little different. So the base bid on this one was to do just regrade the ditches, reshape the roadway to provide a uniform section, and put an asphalt mat. Cozy Drive is a curb and gutter pavement. This is an asphalt mat pavement where they're reshaping easements and reshaping the roadway to get a uniform section. Because if you actually go out there and you look at it, that road's not perfectly straight. So part of the task is to clean it up a little bit and to reshape it a little bit. It included reshaping the ditches, replacing cross-street culverts within the project. It included, because of the turning movements at the intersection, and had requested that we include concrete pavement at the intersection. So alt 1 was one where we would just go to just plain asphalt throughout. But the danger there is those turning movements in the intersection. Since cars would be going faster, you could end up with extra wear on the pavement there. So to your point, that was the reason why alt 1 was included in there, is in case you wanted to save a little bit of money on the project.
That shaping that you talked about, though, that's only where the red is. The ditch.
Yeah, the ditch shaping. Well, for the base bid, it would be just the ditches in the where it's in red there on the screen. Correct. Alt 1 just deleted the concrete at the intersection. Alt 2 was to go ahead and regrade the ditches, replace culverts on the rest of the project.
So the green up there is alt 2.
Yeah, the green is alt 2.
The base bid includes the ditch work in the red.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and alt 3 was just doing concrete on the red, changing that to concrete pavement.
Right. Okay. So clarify for me, please, what is the engineering estimate for the ditches on that total project, alt 2 plus the base bid ditch work?
It would have been roughly 620,000.
620,000.
Yeah.
That was the engineering estimate.
That was our engineer's estimate on that.
Okay.
I did look at this, because whenever you miss a project, wherever you go over significantly, you're like, what are the cost drivers? What drove that difference? And so we always try to look at that type of thing. And I just realized those are Ann's notes. Those aren't mine.
Do you have different numbers in your notes?
I had made a couple scribbles on my notes.
Okay.
And I was looking at it, I'm like, my scribbles have disappeared. So whenever we have a project like this, we want to look at what the cost drivers were. And one of the biggest cost drivers on this project is we had budgeted $10 a cubic yard for excavation. And bear in mind, on a large project site like Cedar Pass that was done over there, normally excavation runs $3 a yard when you're just doing out in the field, just working. We tripled it. It's harder to say what that number was. We tripled it. But the actual as bid price by Kansas Paving, who was the low bidder on this project, was $28 a yard. So it's 10 times normal cost. And that's just all the variables you're dealing with when you're in an existing neighborhood of different things that lead into it. So that was a big cost driver on the project, was that. In addition to that, the site clearing number, which it's always a stab in the dark, was $13,000 more. The storm sewer was consistently more expensive than our estimate, but like the 12-inch pipe in particular was $30 a linear foot more than we had anticipated for that. So that was a cost driver, and then also reworking the gravel ended up being $16,000 more than we expected. And then some of the erosion materials, those ended up running probably a total of $15,000 more. There's obviously a lot of other incremental costs that were higher than anticipated, but it's always a challenge. But those are some cost drivers that were different on this project in particular compared to the Cozy Drive that contributed to it being higher, that excavation being a big item, and the culvert pipes being more expensive than expected.
Did we commit to a dollar amount for the section in red?
Yeah, it was $96,000 on this one is what the original commitment was.
And did we, when we first tried to get a petition on all of Aurora Park, how much did we think was?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but as I recall, it was closer. Like I said before, I think the total was like 495,000. So it's probably 380 or 375 was what was originally.
So those
committed.
numbers that you're giving us are for the ditch work or for the paving work?
So those were in the base bid numbers, just the base bid. That did not include alt 2.
The number we were just talking about was how much Bel Aire was going to kick in.
Yeah, and on alt 2, just so you know, they actually had $30 a cubic yard for their excavation in alt 2.
But in
Mr. Mayor.
total, the ditch work for all the total neighborhood is $620,000.
Right, not according to this table we got here. It's 173,000 for the
Yeah,
ditch work
the remaining of the ditch work was
For-
174,000.
That's the remaining.
for
yeah.
Kansas paving.
But
Yep.
there's also embedded in the base bid ditch work for the
Yeah, there
paved
was
area.
there was we had as far as for ditch work on ours, we had 30,000, but the cost was more like 85,000 for the ditch work
All right, for the paved area,
for the paved area.
85,000 for the paved area.
That's the bid amount. Yeah.
What was the engineer's estimate?
The total of the engineer's estimate was 519,000, and the Kansas Paving's bid, which was the low bid, was 717,000.
Well, yeah, I see that. But what I'm trying to clarify in the base bid is there's a paving element to that and there's a ditch element to that.
Correct.
And I want to try to separate that out. What is that ditch element of that base bid?
And where that gets complicated is all of the storm sewer pipe work is part of that ditch work. You've got some site clearing that's more of the ditch work. So on the fly here, it's quite a few different numbers to calculate. But I mean, just looking at 70, 100, 140, 152, 147. It looks like I'm going to say that the ditch part of it was probably 200,000 of the original bid, counting all the earthwork
In the base bid.
In the base bid,
200,000
around 200,000. That's estimated. I don't have my calculator.
Yeah,
out, but-
I get it. Okay. And then you need to add to that alt 2 if you want to do the entire neighborhood. right?
Yeah, and we had 101,000 is what we had
Right, so
estimated on that.
About $300,000.
Yeah, so we had about 300,000 budgeted.
Okay. Similar to what we were talking about on item B, how would that work out if, let's just say if we took Kansas Paving's numbers, how much of that base bid plus alt two ditch would be drainage, all the drainage issues?
So just looking at Kansas Paving's bid.
Yeah, just to see how that compares.
It'll be almost 400,000.
Maybe.
So about 285, 290,000 on the base bid, and then 173. So it'd be 460,000 total.
460?
460 roughly.
Okay. Because similar to what we were saying in item B, I think that's our target, that we say that's what our city commitment is. Because that's what we said we would.
Yeah,
address.
and again, when we were looking at this before, if you were looking at what the earlier conversations a few years ago, though, it would have been the city was looking at a little under 400,000 if I remember right, but I don't have those numbers on me right now. But
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
can you, so in the petition says that the total cost of the improvements, the estimated cost is 677,000. With 96,000
in the
being
original petition, yes.
the drainage, but the base bid engineer estimate is 519,000. Why is the base bid not, or the engineer estimate, I'm sorry, on the base bid not the same as the 677?
Because of the we had utility relocation easements, staking engineering,
Stuff we've
inspection.
already paid for.
Well, some of it's paid for, some of it's not. So like the inspection hasn't been paid for. That's still upcoming. That's one of those hourly not to exceed things that comes during construction. So that hasn't been paid for.
Because there'll be like inspection services on top of these.
Yeah, and
things
those
that'll
are
have to be
accounted
paid
for in the petition. But that's what.
But they're not in the bids.
But they're not in
so
the
there'll
bids.
be more
Correct.
money coming after these two.
That would be part of. And so when we're looking at when we're looking at it, we actually did include those other fees in our numbers to kind of help make sure those are factored in. So the sheet with the green numbers on it, or green sections, I don't know if you looked at that or not.
Page 40.
Page
Yeah.
40. Ted had asked us to kind of break out some different scenarios on costs to the homeowners, depending on the city's participation on it.
Now, on the drainage situation, what I remember from our discussion on the drainage was that the city was interested in fixing the drainage, but a big contributor to the drainage to the drainage issues is the erosion from the non-paved roads. And until you fix the paved roads, we're always going to be fighting those drainage ditches. And so I'm not, at this 10 seconds, I'm not leaning towards wanting to do the alternate two ditch, and instead really just focus on the petition, which is the red, and focus on the paving in the red and the ditch work in the red, because that's really the scope of the petition. If there's other drainage work that needs done in Aurora Park, I almost think that we should just treat that as a separate matter. Which we know that there's work, but there's always going to be work because there's going to constantly be erosion in the non-paved areas.
If we don't do anything in the green, is that going to screw up the drainage in the red though?
No. It's still an open ditch project regardless. And so, I mean, most of this, there's a drainage basin. The way the water breaks, you're only getting a little bit of the green that goes towards the red anyway. Most of the green goes other directions. It goes to the west and up in through. There's a ditch that runs up through. I think it's Dr. Burrow's property there. That's where most of that water goes through from the south. The stuff on the west goes in from the west. So there's minimal impact on the project, and I wouldn't worry about that part of it.
Yeah, because I mean, part of that dynamic of the conversation was, hey, if the residents are willing to participate in solving the erosion problem by fixing the gravel roads and turning them into solid surface that's not going to erode, then the city's going to pony up and invest in like really permanently fixing the drainage and making that excellent. And so we don't have that participation in the rest of the neighborhood. That makes me a lot less inclined to.
Now, I'll say that the one thing to think about that hasn't been talked about here out loud, the normal process in a situation like this where a project goes significantly over would be to have a meeting with the people who signed the petition and say, are you willing to sign up? Are you interested enough in having these improvements that you're willing to pay more? When we're working with our development clients, that's not an uncommon conversation with them. Now, the difference here is you've got, I don't remember the number of total folks at 22 shares. You got 22 people that you got to get on board if you want to do that. So one of the options you have tonight is not to make a decision, but to have a meeting with the residents and say, hey, these are the cost differences you're looking at. These are the options. What can we do? And have that discussion. So as far as you're not obligated to, you could table the bids for this tonight. They're good for, I think is it 60 days? So there's time on this one if you weren't sure on that. And I know you're trying to be consistent between the two projects, but the scenario between the two projects is greatly different because one is within the estimate, one is significantly over the estimate.
I do think the other thing to be really clear on, though, is that in no scenario are we talking about doing these additional ditch improvements. Would the red part of the project be special assessed for the green part of the project? We would not be, doing ditch work in part of the neighborhood and then charging those 22 homeowners for that. I just want to be very clear that it's my understanding that that is not possible.
And I would
to
agree
happen.
with that.
That should not happen. But to talk about your discussion about not doing anything in the green, we do have another situation here is that green area has not been properly maintained for a long time. And so there is some responsibility that we have to do something like that. And this was an opportunity to go and redress that and correct that issue. I don't know of a better way to do it than this, but if somebody has an idea, I'm all ears.
Is there also a discount by doing it all together with the contractor?
What's that?
For the green, do the green. With
That's
the
built
contractor?
into the price already. That their price is based on doing it. Are you asking if they did just the green and not the red?
No, the other way around. If we came back and tried to do the green later as a totally separate discussion.
Oh yeah, you're undoubtedly not going to get as good a price if you came back at a later date on that. I would be surprised if they gave you a better price in the future.
Mr. Mayor, I'd asked our staff, is that true? Have we not been working to maintain those ditches? I thought a number of years ago, staff started working to proactively manage those ditches and start making some improvements on them consistent with the studies that had been done on slopes and things like that. So I was thinking that we had been working to maintain those ditches.
Yeah, really in the last 8 to 9 years, we have been choosing a couple 100-foot section to do a year. The residents have not been very happy with our work, but we are very limited in the equipment that we have. We don't have the equipment that the contractors do. So we can continue doing it. We can continue receiving complaints about what we have done our best to do. But I think if we do go ahead and hire the contractor, I think it'd get a better product at the end and definitely get it all done at the same time.
If we get it all done at the same time, we only get one batch of complaints, right?
That is correct.
You will get them. There's no doubt about that.
We already know that. You've told us there's trees that are going to have to be taken out and other things because they're growing in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Hamburg.
And since you're up here, with the possibility of that new gravel going in every part south of the red there, where does that play in? If we did the ditch work all over, it would be best to put that new gravel in at that time. Is that right? While you're doing that?
That's likely what we would end up doing because the gravel that's currently there is going to get torn up and spread all over the place. And it's just the nature of construction. It is not a clean.
So even
line.
if it were the end of the summer and not quite a year to October, we should probably make our decision at that point.
Yeah, I think that we would likely go ahead and move forward with that project and potentially wrap it into the scope of this and have if the contractor's out there, maybe have him grade it and blade it too.
So the question has just caught my eye. I hadn't caught this on this map before, but that green section along Parkwood down there, as it turns in, goes down there to, I think it's 38th or 39th Street. What's that intersection there
38th.
on the right, lower right-hand side of the screen? Yeah. So most of that is gravel around that curve. It's gravel road now. Is there no need to do any work on the drainage in that area?
We focus mostly on the areas with this one. We had focused mostly on the areas where there was existing ditches we're cleaning out. The ditches actually kind of go away right there, right now in that corner area. That's a break where the water, where it mostly goes to the west there. Once you get to there, it disappears, and then new ditches show up going south. We focused on the area to the west.
So there's no need to do any work there in that area, is that what you're saying?
It's a less critical area.
And you're
Okay.
going to be getting a lot more, there's going to be a very significant change to those existing properties along that area than what you're seeing right now.
As far as drainage?
Especially the one to the west, there's a lot of trees there, and it's a near vertical slope going from the gravel up to their yard. So that one in particular, and then the east side is pretty flat. So there's not a whole lot
Okay.
there's really no ditches there now.
Okay. I just wondered if we were going to make sure that was covered, that we weren't going
Yeah,
to
no,
create a
very,
problem
very
there.
valid question.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you.
So,
Well-
and I'll just mention on the green, I don't know if you looked through that green chart or not, it was just different scenarios as far as how much participation the city had in the different alternatives, what the costs would be, the impacts on the city and the impacts to the residents. And the one thing about it is as you work through these, the numbers don't change a lot. I mean, like, if the city was to not do 100% of the overage and do 75%, it raises the cost about somewhere between $13 and $20 a month, which is it's money, but it's not significant increases. It's not doubling the cost or anything like that. So I think that's where I mentioned earlier, part of the conversation is if you don't feel comfortable tonight making the kind of financial commitment to do one of the alternates, one of the options is to meet with the residents and see what they want to do. And I think it would be in the best interest of the city if you're going to push some of that significant extra cost to the residents to think about that meeting.
Ms.
Mr. Mayor,
Hamburg?
this might be a question for Mr. Cowan. So if we had that meeting with residents, the petition is still in place. What would that look like? I mean, would we essentially be verbally redoing the petition? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, and this was referenced earlier, the petition has an inflation factor, 1% per month. And if you wanted to rely solely on that, that builds to a pretty big number that probably supports you accepting any number of these bids and staying committed to your $96,000 obligation and just assess the rest. So that's kind of a legal consideration. This is different, just the entire process. There was a letter that outlined things, had a per month assessment in it. And I think that's a lot of what the discussion is probably centered about, that unlike some of your other projects, there may be a more definite expectation about what the assessments will be someday. And so I may not have answered your question, but legally you have quite a bit of flexibility.
Okay.
It's just,
Well, and we could deny it now. I guess we're not locked in even with the petition in place. If the majority of us said, never mind, we can still kill the petition at this point, right?
yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm kind of in favor of getting the property owner's perspective on this. I think that's a good thing to do, and let them tell us, okay, what would they like to do, because it is going to go over. I'm not a big fan of us paying the overages on these. Just like I said on the other project, I don't think we should pay. I think we should just pay for the ditch work, the drainage issue, because we have we committed to doing that. I think we should stay with that. There's a good reason, logical reason for that one. I don't think there's a good, to me, it's not a good argument to say, well, we went over on the paving so we should just do that. But I'd like to see what the property owners think. That's just my view on it. But
So
And I did want
wanna
to
ask this
respond
again.
real quick to Ms. Hamburg's question. You can always repetition. You can do a new petition that supersedes and invalidates the prior petition. And we do that often when we have projects go over where we'll have to repetition it. And I say often, there was a period where inflation got kind of nutty about 5 or 6 years ago, and it felt like we missed on every single project. And we did it all the time back then. Now it's relatively infrequent. I've only had it happen twice in the past, probably. Of course, I shouldn't say that out loud, but I've only had it happen a couple times in the past couple of years now. But I know there was another project in one of the other communities where the engineer's estimate was $500,000 and it was over $1 million, and there was only one bidder. And it's like, what can you do there? So,
And I'm just wondering if that getting everybody in a room might get really heated, where people could just, in their homes, weigh it and say, well, have I changed my position on this or not? I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
You could go with more of that's certainly an option, is for you as the city to say, and I'm just going to pick a number here, so I'm not trying to set it for you, but let's say that you decided you wanted to do option, if you wanted to do option 1 only, and you were willing to pay 50% of the overage, which would be $190,000 instead of $96,000. The impact on the residents is it would go from $147 to $173 a month. We could send an alternate letter out to them and just see if they wanted to support that. You could do that and there may be other ways. Ted would have to probably give some input on whether or not you'd want to give a couple different options for people to vote on. I think you want to keep it as simple as possible when you take it out to the public. In that fact, if you're going to send out a letter, I think you want to pick your poison.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Get out a complicated one, they're going to be confused,
Not to get
just like we are.
not to get deeper in this, and that's the problem with the letter.
Yeah.
How do we write a letter to this problem, and do we invite them to a workshop and explain it? The other issue to consider is I think 13 of the 22 signed the petition originally, so the margin for error, how do you treat that if a few are adamantly against it? So there's a lot of things to consider with this strategy as well, that we have to look at.
The original petition said up to $677,000. The base bid from Kansas Paving is $717,000. That's a $40,000 difference. There's the inspection costs that aren't included in the base bid. Do we know what that will be? How much total over would this be?
So what we did, if you look at the green, the 94,750, that's the maximum amount the engineering and the inspection could cost, and that's if we use the entire budget on it.
So that would put us $130,000 over on the petition.
It's already included. So to your question,
To the 677.
on top of the Kansas Paving's bid.
Yep.
If you add that, yes, you're correct.
Okay.
And that's rough numbers too. We do have one utility relocation that we have budgeted for $10,000 as well.
I think this is tricky because there's also a timeline. If you try to re-petition and you try to get people together and get input, then these bids aren't good, and you're gonna put it back out to bid, and the bids may be different. They may come in higher again, and then what do you do?
I may or may not have had a situation where the low bidder was $9,000 less than the second low bidder, and we re-petitioned it, and weirdly enough, their bid raised by $8,500.
Surprise.
Prices
That may
could
or may
go
not
up,
have
and
happened.
there is a decent gap between low bidder and second low bidder about $70,000.
I'm not a fan of going out for rebid.
Yeah, I don't think
that's
rebidding
smart.
is an
I'm not either, and
effective- I don't
I'm not
think
sure
we
it's
want that.
practical to either repetition or to accurately
No, I don't
get
think you need to do
a
that.
pure citizen feedback in that time. So I kind of think we need to make a decision
Okay,
on it.
I agree.
let's make a decision.
I want to go back though to the numbers because I've kind of got them screwed up in my head. Of the section in red, how much did the city say they were going to pay?
The original commitment was $96,000.
Okay. So I think we stick to that. My suggestion is we tell the residents, we're going with the base bid and we're going to take 96,000 off, just like we said. But we accept the bid that includes the ditch and the concrete, and the city pays the difference. Because I think we need to do the ditch work, even if it's so bad and it's been withheld so long that I think we need to go ahead and do it.
So basically what you're saying, the ditch work was 174,000 and the original amount was 96,000. So my brain, it's too late in the evening for me to do math. So
The 96,000 you said was just for the red, not for the whole Aurora Park. Or are we not communicating?
well, what I was going to do is I was going to look at the green chart to see approximately what the impact would be if you did that. So that's what I was going to look at.
The thing to consider with your proposal, I think, Councilmember Welch, is if the city's intent was to cover the ditch work in the red when the residents paid for the paving in the red, similar to how you would propose the city cover the ditch work for the entirety of the green, 100% of it. The ditch work came in a lot higher in the base bid than the 96,000, about 200,000.
Yeah, it was 290.
So under your proposal, the residents in red would be paying for half of their ditch work, where the residents in green would pay for 0% of their ditch work.
That's true, but the other residents aren't getting paving, and that apparently is what's causing the ditch work to cost more because of the culverts and other things that are going in.
Well, but the other point is if you're paying the 96,000, you are covering their ditch work, really.
The 96,000.
The 96,000
does fully cover.
Well,
the
I'm not
ditch
going to say
work portion
fully,
of the
but
red.
it is covering a significant portion of that.
I thought you
cost.
said it was 200 for the red, so
Yeah,
that'd
you
be
said,
half.
you
Of
gave me a number 290,000.
290 even.
290. Okay.
So
That was on the Kansas paving
And
bid.
I-
It was-
Yeah.
That's just,
Okay.
that's just
So
that
you'd be
one.
covering a portion of their
thought
bid,
it
I
was
guess.
that
I
where
should say.
you would be covering all of the portion of everyone else's. So
Yeah,
they'd be
and-
penalized for paying for their roadway to be improved.
I thought the 290 included the alternate two ditch. That's why
No,
we got too
there's
many numbers here.
290 plus 174 was the alternate two.
Yeah.
It was 460.
So $290,000 for the ditch work for that one block.
So, and I'm including stuff like the site clearing is 63,000, site restoration was 5, that's 68, 85,000 for the excavation, the regrading. So 68 plus 84 is 170-ish. And then the pipe work, I included the ditch or the culvert pipes, and that was where it did get up to probably over the 200,000. Yeah.
But we're not paying for culvert pipes anyplace else, are we?
Yeah. Their culverts are all being replaced throughout the project.
Through all of Aurora Park.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we ran into on that is
Well, that's really
when
weird,
we
man.
talked with the
That's just-
contractors, they told us, oh, we're going to bid them to replace them anyway. Cause we tried to have it where they were going to try and salvage them. And they said, if we're ripping CMPs out, they're going to break. We're not going to be careful with it. And so they said, we basically changed it to just replace them all because it was complicating the bidding process. So that was one of the addendums we did, was to clean that up because they told us they were going to bid it anyway.
Are you able to cleanly separate the ditch work from the paving work in the red section? Can you?
Yeah, I mean,
Can
we
you
can take the bid
allocate
items and break them
those
out separately.
costs?
That's a task we could do. So certainly, I mean, one option here is if you wanted to table this item till the next meeting, we could come up with a different cost breakdown for you to consider. And if you wanted to focus on just like alternate one, if you just wanted to focus on the ditches and the base bid, we can break that down. We could give that to you for the next meeting. On the fly tonight, like I said,
Similar to the green ditch.
yeah, we could work with city staff to kind of come up with a more clear focus on what you're wanting to look at, especially if the goal is to figure out the ditch cost allocated to this project versus that project and trying to cover that and make that part of the discussion.
I think the city should cover the cost of the ditch work in the red, and I'm not sure I've heard anyone say an opinion the city shouldn't cover that cost.
No, I haven't said
we
that,
should.
but I don't think that we should pay 290,000 for it when we can get the whole rest of it for 173. So I question the numbers, and I think maybe we should table this until we get a better schedule of numbers.
Yeah, it doesn't seem logical that the rest of Aurora Park is only 173,000, but this red section is 290. That doesn't make logical sense.
I'll let Dane go first.
I would request that you table this to allow Ken to look at this a little bit more. Some of the numbers that he is pulling out for excavation and compacted fill, that's not just the ditches. That's also the manipulation of the subgrade, the reworking of the road, the straightening of the road to help get it in the correct location. So and then the widening of the road too, because it's not wide enough for a pavement section. So you're looking at a lot more than just redoing the ditches. This was not bid out as two separate groups, ditch, road. It was all together. So you've got, down for the ditch, up for the road, down for the other ditch, up for the road. That's one section that the numbers are all incorporated in there. So he can do some manipulation in the software program that he used to design this project to help separate those numbers out a little bit. But it's not going to be a very clear cut. It's kind of all mushed in together. I mean, baking a cake, I can put eggs and flour and but I can't tell exactly which part of that finished cake is the flour. So it's all mushed in together.
So you understand though our
yes.
desire to pay for the ditch work because we think that's the city's obligation.
Yes.
So you have enough information to go back and rework numbers.
I think he can get very close, and I'll work with him on kind of how to cut the sections to determine that.
Okay.
But I think we can get a pretty good idea of what it is. It's going to look much different than the bid form that's in front of you with how we separate it out, but we should be able to get a close enough area approximation to allow you to decide how much you want to put in for the city as for the ditch. We can get a
Okay.
good
Okay.
estimate for
All right.
that.
Then I will make a motion to table the bids for the Aurora Park 40th and Parkwood paving and ditch work.
You're talking motion on tabling item C. Okay, so Mr. Welch motion to table item C. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a second from Mr. David. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The item's tabled. Let's go back to item B real quick, and then I think we need to move to executive session. How do we want to move forward with item B? The ditch work on that is $121,641.50.
No, we said we'd pay 105.
So
Then they added the 16,000 because of they didn't include that blue section. Remember?
Mr. Welch's, one of the discussions he had earlier was to take the 105 that was already added and then add in the $16,600. So the city's total contribution would be roughly 122,000.
In the bid, did the 105,000 cover the ditch work in the base bid, or was there an overage there as
So
well?
the offsite ditch work that we're talking about was not specifically covered in that.
But not the alternate ditch work, but if you look at
Any of the other grading, the taking care of the ditches, storm sewer, all
we
that
feel
was
like
allocated.
the engineer's estimate that got us to the 105 was about right for this project, where it was potentially not right for the other.
Well, and so cost drivers on the pipe, the cost, like the money that's involved there. We have some we had some large cross street culvert pipes. We had some other some large cross street culvert pipes. We have some special inlets and some flume work and stuff. Plus just the regrading the ditches and eliminating the ditches were all kind of that 105,000.
Mayor Benaj, I think it'd be wise to table B as well and have Ken do the same calculations for Cozy.
Okay.
Yeah.
If
The
you
thing,
want to do that.
before you do that, though, the thing I will say is, in terms of working with the residents on it, if you're covering $122,000 of the cost, when you look at what we were looking at on this, if you're willing to do that, that already makes it. It already works for if you're not including the concrete paving, it already works without the concrete paving being part of the equation.
From our discussion, I had the impression that even if we selected the concrete paving, we're going to be within dollars of the per month estimate, like $2 to $5.
Yeah, it's not going to be a significant
directionally.
difference. And it's
so I'm a lot more comfortable moving forward with this one, and I'm not sure that we should do a whole bunch more analysis on it.
yeah,
I'm ready to move forward also.
yeah. The biggest question there is the one variable is, since we don't know the interest rates.
Yeah.
We may come back in 3 years and Ted says, well, we sold this at 3.1% interest. There's plenty of money. The city only needs, the residence cost is actually lower than estimated before. So there's a very real possibility of that. And again, the original estimate was $32,000 per lot. With this breakdown, the way we've estimated, it's $28,000 per lot. So there's really, in terms of the money they agreed to pay, disregarding the cost of the interest, we're still within that estimate on the petition for what that's worth.
I will make a motion that we accept the base bid from Pearson, including alternate 1 and alternate 2. The city will pay $105,000 as agreed before, plus the cost of alt 1.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Welch, a second by Mr. Smith to accept the base bid plus alt 1 and alt 2, where the city will pay $105,000 plus the cost of alt 1. Any further questions or discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Hamburg.
I was just going to say, I have really struggled with this, and my position hasn't changed over the past year and a half. I can fully appreciate that paving this road is the holistic solution. It's a frustrating situation because if we don't do that, the ditch and the drainage is still an issue. And if 100% of residents had said yes on this, I'd have no problem. Specials make a ton of sense to assess to the benefiting properties when they know ahead of time. This isn't chump change, and it's not chump change for 5 years. It's over 20 years. So that's why I'm going to not support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify the motion, did it have a not to exceed amount of 386,209.50? Is that what we?
You are correct. I forgot to do that.
Okay.
It would be 386,209 for the not to exceed amount.
Okay, thank you.
386,209, not to exceed. You're modifying your motion to that, Mr.
Yeah, I
Welch?
forgot that whole sentence.
Okay,
For the
Mr.
total
Smith.
bid not to exceed $386,209.50 and authorize the mayor to sign.
And Mr. Smith, you agree to that as a second? Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
So that motion carries 3-1. I want to move on to executive session. And how long do we need, Ted?
15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay, so move on to item 14A for 15 minutes.
Can we do D in less than 5 minutes and get those people out of here?
I don't
I
know.
see some smiles at that suggestion. They'd like to go home.
Well-
I'd really like to go ahead and finish D if we can.
Okay, we'll go on to D.
Mr.
And
Mayor,
this-
can we get a motion if we're going to move items with a
We're
second?
not moving items. We
Oh.
went back to
Oh.
the original order of the agenda. Okay, so this is the Public Works Department operates a crane truck purchased in 2006 and has reached its end of life. The crane truck is scheduled to be replaced in 2024 with funds available for Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund. Staff have sourced quotes from 3 local suppliers, and our Public Works Director, Marty McGee, is here to present the purchase and answer questions. I actually personally reviewed this current crane truck with Marty McGee a couple months ago. I have seen the organizations trying to use underrated equipment like this. It's a disaster waiting to happen. So we need to replace this as quickly as possible to avoid any issues due to having underrated equipment for Public Works do their job. And that's my 2 cents worth. Mr. McGee.
I'm here to answer any questions you guys have. I think we went over quite a bit last meeting we had.
I read that the sizes on the cranes, and I understand the upgrade now. I originally asked if we could move it over, but I see your point now. And I'm going to get the road on going here. I'm going to motion to accept the quote from Master Tech at a cost not to exceed $187,857 and authorize the city manager to sign all related documents.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Welch, a second by Ms. Hamburg. Any further discussion?
I think we talked about this one at length in the past, so I'm good with it.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. All right, now we'll
Didn't
move to
even take
executive
5.
session for 15 minutes. We can have a motion for that.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Hamburg.
I'm going to make a motion to go in executive session for the sole purpose of discussing the subject of attorney-client consultation regarding contractual obligations pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 for consultation with an attorney for the public body or agency which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship. Invite the city manager, assistant city manager, city attorney, city engineer, and Neil Ghosh. The meeting will be for a period of 15 minutes, and the open meeting will resume in City Council chambers at 9 p.m.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Hamburg, a second by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0 in executive session for 15 minutes. All right, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. We held an executive session and no binding action was taken. Ready to move on to item 15, discussion and future issues. Are there any other issues we need to talk about? If not, I'll move on to adjournment. A motion by Mr. Smith, a second by Mr. David to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, too bad. That motion carries 4-0.